Good morning, church. If you're visiting today, nudge the person that brought you and they can email you the sermon. But today, because it's getting into Christmas and family, I'm going to talk about how Jesus treated his parents and why. Why? Because Christmas often brings up a lot of emotions. There's high expectations with family. And there are a lot of movies about how disastrous Christmases go when people really put so much effort into making them great and their expectations are not met. And even as Christians, we can get some things really out of skew. So I'm going to be a reminder of how Jesus treated his parents and his family and why. So today, we're going to take a look at literally that fact. But ask yourself, was Jesus a model child to his parents? Or rather, did Jesus model what a perfect child should be to his parents? And there is a big difference. You see, what do parents think children should be like today? Well, many of them believe that they should just obey and do everything that their parents say. However, there's a big problem with that. Because the parents are sinners, of course, we shouldn't do everything our parents do and say. Right. Otherwise, we'll be sinful just like them. So even as a parent myself, I'm like, no, please don't do what I say and what I do. Please do what Jesus said and what Jesus did. Come on. Because that's the problem, is that we think we know best, especially as parents, because we go from this attitude of, I'm teaching my kid what to do, I'm teaching what I do, and we get into a relationship that rarely actually changes. Which is even when I'm the youngest of all of my family, I'm the youngest of all of my cousins. So I'm all little Joe. Okay, I'm always little Joe. I'm 52 years old, but I'm always little Joe. Okay, and when I wrote a book on money, they're like, but you're little Joe, you can't do that. You can't give us advice on areas that are really serious. And so last time I went home, my family were talking about, issues with dad and his retirement and stuff. I said, well, I'll just have a talk to him. Like, no, you're little Joe. And I just went and had a chat with him. How you doing with your money, Dad? And everything. Fine. And we had a great talk with him. I said, what's the problem? Why didn't you just speak to him? So it's amazing how our family dynamics are pretty weird for most of us, is the truth of it is. We're going to take a look at Jesus' life and go through a progress of how he treated his parents, why and at what age, and exactly what the outcome was. So point number one, Jesus transferred his allegiance from his parents to God when he became a man. So we're going to pick up in Luke 2, verse 41. It says, every year Jesus went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But they were unaware of it. Thinking it was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So Jesus' family had a tradition here of visiting the temple every year. We have a tradition, Christmas. Okay. Did Jesus join in this tradition, even though the temple was possibly run by not righteous people? Yeah, it was no harm in this tradition, this custom. He went along with them. What was different about how he acted this year, though? Well, he'd come to an age where the Jews would say that young boys become men. That's where they have bar mitzvah. And he stayed behind. He made a decision. You know what? I'm going to stay behind. But why? And then why did it take 3 days for his parents to find him? There was a disconnect between the parent and the child, which there often is. You know, they looked in all the wrong places. And let's be honest, if you'd lost your 13-year-old, where would you look? Most probably in all the video game cafes right now. You wouldn't expect him to find him in church, would you? You'd be like, I just sat in church praising God. No, he's 13, he's going to be off with the video games. I don't know what the equivalent of video games was then, but the issue is they didn't look in the temple. And where was Jesus and why? He was like, man, I'm in the temple. I'm in my Father's house. So the parents were like, you've mistreated us, Jesus. He was like, no, I haven't. And being the Son of God and being perfect, no, he hadn't. He's got, I don't understand. They were like, we don't understand you, child. He's like, well, I don't understand you, parent. Sound familiar? He was like, I was in my Father's house. And again, we see this attitude of Jesus of, Mom and Dad, I'm trying to teach you to love and win over our family. Let me just encourage you when it comes to having your spiritual times, reading your Bible and praying. Get up and do it first in the morning. I've been there, I've done it. While I'm on holiday, I'll do it by 10 o'clock. Then 10 o'clock comes. So I'll do it by 12 o'clock. Then I'll do it by 1 o'clock. Then I'll do it by 3 o'clock. I've still got plenty of time. And midnight comes and there's that really cool movie, The Matrix, on that you wanted to watch and you haven't seen for 100 years. Then it's 2 a.m. in the morning, you go, I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll give you the great spiritual rule. Get up at your normal time. Have your Bible study. Have your prayer. Go back to bed. That's what you can do. Okay? Or, like us if we're old, I just do get up at the same time and have an afternoon snooze. I just become like my dad. Okay. But whatever it is, you still put God first. You don't play that game of, I've got lots of time. Because otherwise what happens is you go, you know what? I'll do it at 2 o'clock. And the mum goes, son, can you help me with these chores? Now you're ticked at your mum. Because she's making you unspiritual. No, you were already unspiritual before that. So we see that Jesus is teaching his parents by action that he is to put God above them. You know, we used to have this funny thing go, okay, I get up early, I go, Mum, I'm going for a walk. I was really going for a prayer. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, but I didn't want to sound too religious. I'm just going for an early morning walk. And in England, it's freezing and the snow's coming down, the hail's coming down. Like, what the heck's going on with you? But it's more like I had to just sort of, and I was going for a walk, but I was also praying. But it's got to be like, Mum, I love you, but this is what I do now. I read my Bible and I pray. So I'm going to spend that time. I'll be back by 7 o'clock. I'll help you with the breakfast. We can do it together, etc. But every time I go home, my mum gets up about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And she has her 2 or 3 hour Bible study and prayer. That's our time. That's when we talk, when nobody else is up. And I have to get up really early to do that, to really connect with my mum. Because I have to serve my mum, not expect my mum to serve me. You ever thought about that about mums? Everybody looks forward to Christmas as a holiday, except for mums. Mums need a holiday to get over Christmas. You know what I mean? There's no holiday for them. You're like, Mum, where's my turkey? Where's my flag? Do the washing up. I love our tradition. In England, there is no washing up done by women on Christmas Day. None. The men line up like some great thing. The one time a year we are doing the washing up. And the mum and the sisters are looking at us like, it's going to break, he's going to smash it, it's going to break. So we put them next to the presents. Anyway, okay, that's our tradition. Anyway, point 2. Okay. Jesus becomes a mission-focused man. So we're now picking up with Jesus having grown up and finding him preaching the gospel around the countryside. So in Mark 3:20 it says, then Jesus entered a house and again a crowd gathered so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind. Jesus' family had thought he had lost the plot, become a loony, a fundamentalist, a radical, a religious nutcase. When Jesus preached, how did his family react? They went, this is weird. They wanted to follow. People wanted to follow Jesus. People wanted to spend time with him that weren't his family. And his family went, this is weird. I didn't expect him to become a minister. How intense can preaching the gospel make your life? It can make it really, really busy. It's amazing that you meet one person and then they really want to become a Christian, and then you have to change your whole schedule to fit in with them, and then you meet another one and they bring a friend. All of a sudden you've got 3 people that all want to study the Bible. And you're like, my normal 4 or 5 hours of a night has just disappeared. I'm now getting home at midnight, getting up early in the morning to teach them to pray. And your family look at you and go, you are nuts. That's the minister's job. But we know as Christians, there is no hierarchy or laity clergy. It's just everybody does the same. When Jesus' family heard about this, they went, he's out of his mind. He's so busy preaching the gospel, he doesn't even have time to eat. Now, I know Manny would never allow that to happen, but maybe some of you other brothers. You know, they thought he was mad. How do our family feel when we start living a disciple's life? When we get out there and we're evangelizing all the time, people go, you're too busy with all this church stuff. It's not church stuff, it's God stuff. Yeah. I saw this one person said, you expect your people in your church to evangelize. I go, yes. But our church doesn't do that. I go, yes, but Jesus did that. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we have to understand, when I first became a Christian, I came from quite a religious family. I wasn't religious. But I really struggled to see my family as not real Christians. Because I thought they're super religious. I mean, some of them get up and read their Bible and pray for 3 hours a day. That doesn't make you a Christian. It doesn't. Reading the Bible and praying is meant to make you godly. It doesn't mean you are godly. Right. All right? The Pharisees did that. It didn't change them at all. It's, do you apply it? But when I thought about it, I go, do my family members get up and go out and talk to people about Jesus? Do they wake up going, you know what? I need to go and talk to people about Jesus and study the Bible with them. Are there days off, Saturday and Sunday, just full of non-Christians? In the last 20 years, have I seen a group grow around my parents that has just, they've seen more and more people become Christians and Christians, so much so they've actually had to almost go to their job and go, I can't spend so much time at work because I've got so many people I'm taking care of. Or are they just committed to their church and they expect their minister to do all of that? See, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at somebody and you go, well, they've been a Christian 20 years, and they don't list off all the people that they've helped convert, study the Bible with people. I think sometimes we get this a little bit off key. You go, well, Joe, that's your job, you're the minister. That's not how this church started. Kerry and I started while we were working, running high-powered jobs in our front room. We preached, we would drag our kids around on Saturday, go out evangelizing all day, find more and more people to study the Bible with. We hired a hall from our personal wealth. There were 5 of us. We preached the gospel. Our biggest service was 36 in attendance for 5 of us. We were just being Christians. And as a result of more and more people becoming Christians, we better go on staff. That should be everybody's life to a larger or lesser degree. But just being committed to a church doesn't make you a disciple. You're not really a disciple till you've made a disciple. It's not about commitment. And I really, you know, as life goes on, you see the difference. You see the difference of somebody's life. Are there constantly more and more people, not people that were already religious, but uncommitted people, broken-hearted people, that they actually help change their life with the Word of God? You know, this is where we get so much persecution, is our standard of the way we live our life, the way we spend our extra time, is the standard of Jesus. We are consumed unapologetically with seeking and saving the lost. We don't make any bones about it. You know, even at Christmas, it's really funny. You can be tempted not to evangelize, can't you? It's almost like, I'll be a Christian, but now we've got a week off and I'm in front of my parents. I'm not going to do it. So where you might go to a restaurant normally, Hungry Jack's or whatever, Solomon, and you might be with a church and you'd evangelize. But now you're like, well, I'm home for 3 days. I'm in Hungry Jack's. The church isn't here. I won't do it. Why? You don't think somebody can't bring somebody from Sydney to sit next to you at a Hungry Jack's on the Gold Coast? Remember Alyssa and Christine moved down from it. There are open people everywhere. You know, those are the perfect opportunities. Those are the Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. We are to share our faith wherever we go and prove to our parents that, yeah, we're Christians. We do this all the time. You know, how do you think Jesus handled this situation? of his parents coming and going, you know what? We think you're nuts. Let's be honest. If my mum or dad or your mum and dad came out there and went, son, you're nuts, get out here. We'd mostly go, sorry guys, bit disturbed. I'll go out and talk to my mum and my dad, and then I'll calm them down and I'll spend some time with them and I'll catch up with you at the leaders' meeting. Is that what Jesus did? Let's have a look. Mark 3:31. Then Jesus' mothers and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him and they told him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. Just imagine that. Your mum and dad come right now and go, you know what? William, come here. Schuster, come here. Get out here. We want to chat. Jesus turns around and says, who are my mother and my brothers? He asked. Then he looked to those seated in a circle around him and said, here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. You know, it's really intense here. Jesus uses the opportunity. He absolutely does. You know, this is where we do. We go, you know what? I've got to get back for church, Mum. What? We're your family. They're not your family. He said, Mum, I love you. You are my physical family. But my spiritual family is back in Sydney. I'm going back. That will really offend them. But you will be obeying Christ. His example. There is no way that you convince your family that we are different unless you show them that we are different. There's no way that you can bring your family to church if you don't show that church is more important than the family. There is always the initial confrontation to spark the interest where they go, man, there is something different about your church, and most of it in brackets, and I don't like it. That's what Jesus' family was saying to him. I don't like this way you're living your life, Jesus. I just don't like it. You know, Jesus didn't try and soften the blow. Why not? Well, he understood that people watch what you do more than what you say. This was an opportunity for Jesus not just to speak it. He goes, guys, I'm going to literally show you how this plays out. You go, this is what you do. When your family come and get you, you carry on preaching. And they won't like it, but it's okay. You know, we do need to be sensitive with our parents, without doubt. There's no point picking a fight just for the sake of picking a fight. And I've had some terrible experiences with my family, and I haven't always been the most sensitive, I'll be honest. I remember when, and again, I was a young, very enthusiastic Christian. I saw my family where they were at spiritually, and I knew it was wrong, and, you know, there was the stale church they were going to that didn't really grow, and then I was part of this dynamic church in London, and I wanted to express it, but I was so young, I just got emotional. And I remember they had two guys in that village, because I come from a small village in England, and that were part of the Pentecostal church. Now, this was like, we're Church of England. I mean, Pentecostal, this was like, whoa, those funny people, the Pentecostal. We've had two of them move into the village, whoa. Anyway, my mum invited them around, didn't know them at all, sat me at the end of the kitchen table, and she basically went, okay, have a go. And they just went for me, and I was emotional. I was now 24, I didn't know what to do, and they got me all in a huff, and they went, say Jesus is Lord. Say Jesus is Lord. I went, no! He said, see, the Bible says if you can't say Jesus is Lord, you're not of him. You're not a real Christian. And I went, and you're all going to hell! And you, Mum! I mean, I got so emotional and stuff like this. Why am I sharing this? So you don't do it. I really love my mum, and my mum, you know, we've laughed about it and forgotten. She's mature, and, you know, she said, I understand, and I saw you get emotional, and my mum knows me well. And we moved on, and she's a great mum. But you got to be careful. You know what? Just insulting people for the sake of it. You can say the truth in a bad way, and it will damage your relationship. So you've got to understand, always try and think about your parents. My mum's faith made me believe in God. My mum taught me how to be committed by her example. My dad is church treasurer. I don't believe the church he goes to is right. But he showed me what to do with my money from a very early age. I owe an enormous amount of my salvation to my parents, which should never be disrespected. I believe that even my parents in their own way are in love with God, but I do not believe they are right with God, and there is a big difference. I was in love with my wife before we were righteously married. And if I had slept with her before I got married, I would have been unrighteous. You can be in love, but not right with God. And let's be honest, the truth is, it's not whether you feel like you're in love with God, it's whether God feels loved by you. You know, we see here Jesus really uses an opportunity very, very wisely, but he picks his moment to demonstrate it. Point 3, Jesus' teachings on family priorities. Jesus later hottens things up, and he gets very, very clear in Matthew 10:32. It says, "For whoever acknowledged me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose I have come to bring peace on earth. I do not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me." Now, it doesn't get more straight than this. But why could Jesus preach this? Because he had demonstrated it in his life. Demonstration before preaching. It's a clear understanding. You know, we go, why did Jesus come? He says he came to save the world. He said there are many reasons why Jesus came. And this is one. It said, I've come to save the world, and I have come to turn families against each other. Wow. Is that what most religious people who call themselves Christians today believe? That Jesus came to break up families? Absolutely. Absolutely. Think about it like this. If you have a body and my hand gets gangrene, you have to cut off the hand to save the rest of the body. Often Jesus looks at family and goes, in order to save 2 in a family, I've got to cut 3 of them out. And Jesus will do that. God will do that. He will do whatever it takes to save the few. You know, how do families feel? It will reflect on them when their children get radical. Well, we come from all sorts of different nations here. For some people, it's really scary. For some of our members, they come from a country where their parents work for the government, and they are terrified that if their children are Christians and go back to that country, they will literally lose their job. That's what they're terrified. Some of us, parents, are just embarrassed. You know, I really appreciate Naeem, Tim's dad. Comes from an Egyptian Coptic Orthodox church. And traditionally, you know, it's like your children should go to that church. And we've had many conversations about it. He gets a lot of flack from Tim coming to this church. But as you know, Naeem comes about once every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, is very positive. And when he gets, you know, really just a lot of aggro from this old church, he goes, you don't understand. The church my son goes to, they're helping people. They're changing people. They're helping them with their education. They're helping them with their marriages. He goes to a good church. Leave me and leave him alone. What has convinced Naeem? I love Naeem. My first interaction with Naeem, I was driving up to Macquarie, all right? And somebody phoned me up, didn't know who. And he just picked up, and for 45 minutes, he screamed at me down the phone. And he said, I'm going to report you to the immigration and this government body and this government body, and, you know, you're stealing my son, and you don't even have children. I went, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, but I do have children. He went, you do? Who are you? I went, I'm Joe. Oh, I'm so sorry, I was after Sean. Anyway, you know, I said, well, let's meet. I said, let's meet. And he came before church, you know, like this, and Tim was there. And he goes, my son needs to get good grades. I said, I agree. My son needs to be good to my wife. I said, I agree. And after I said, is there anything we don't agree on? He says, no. I said, Naeem, I like you. I'm with you. Tim, be a good son. And now we gang up on him. That's how to win the family over. Sometimes you need to take a bit of flack. But basically, we want the same thing. We want everybody to do well. But we're not going to compromise the gospel. However, our families can feel very attacked when we don't obey them. Sometimes it can go, you know what? I feel like I wasn't a good parent if you don't obey me. It's a simple conversation. Mom and Dad, do you get everything right? And if they say yes, well, then you do have a problem. But most parents go, not everything. I said, Dad, you get just 1% of your advice. Could it be wrong? Possibly. I'm just trying to figure out which 1% it is, Dad. That's all I'm trying to do. It's most probably the bit Jesus talks about. Just be kind. So does God want, and Jesus want us to not look after our parents? The answer to that is no. He seriously wants to look after our parents. So as much as Jesus had this conviction on the balance of where we should put God and our parents, he also took people on, viciously, when they didn't love their family. So in Mark 7, verse 1, says, the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of their elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father or mother will be put to death. But if you say if anyone declares what might have been used to help their father or mother is korban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you've handed down, and you do many things like that. Many people, first of all, think in the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments said obey your parents. It says honor them. There is a big difference between honoring and obeying. But Jesus goes, these Pharisees, they had all sorts of traditions, and we come from such a different cultures here. Our families have all sorts of traditions. We've got Chinese New Year, Vietnamese New Year, Cambodian New Year, Australian New Year, all sorts of different things. And then even at home, we've got different cultures. Traditions aren't wrong unless they contradict the word of God. So here is like, your disciples don't even wash their hands. Ugh. He goes, you know what? So what? Did God ever say you need to wash your hands? No. He said, let me talk to you about your tradition. He said, you've created a tradition that is so wicked towards your family. It shows your heart and nowhere close to God. They created this tradition called korban, which was basically this, that if I can figure out how much money it would take for me to look after my parents in their old age, say it would be $500,000 today, and I dedicated that to the temple, not only would I not have to look after my parents, here it says, if I did look after my parents in any way, shape, or form, I would be going against God's will. How did that tradition start? I don't know. Maybe it was from a good heart. Maybe it was somebody saved up to look after their parents died early, and then they gave the money to God's temple. Maybe that's how it started. And it turned from, wow, that was pretty good, to now, you know what, if you do that, even if your parents aren't dead, that means you don't have to look after them. And he goes, you know what, you puff yourself up by giving all this money to God's kingdom, and yet you don't look after your family. So that shows you how wicked you are. Jesus said, when you don't look after your aged family, you won't even make it to heaven. And yet, what do people do today? Stick their family in old people's homes? Don't want their selfish life to be disturbed by their grandmum? There are times, without doubt, when people need to go into care, when they need professional, etc. help. There are things like that happen. But I love the fact, when we employed Effie to come into the church and be a full-time member, he said, well, who's going to look after my mum? I said, we are. You just get a bigger house and she moves in. But I'm in the ministry. I said, great. And what's that got to do with it? What does Jesus teach? Jesus, we look after our family. The truth of it is that this is one of the ways we will convert our family. So many of our family won't come to the kingdom. They're like, I want nothing to do with the church. So God goes, I've got this really great plan. Let's get them really old so they have to move in with you. Then they can't not come to Bible talk. Then they can't not see all the Christians. Because if they won't come to the kingdom, we'll bring the kingdom to them. You see, for God, it's all about seeking and saving the lost. And he is far smarter than us. Far smarter. It's the same with our children. Anybody, a lot of our children, they go to school and they don't hear about God. So if we don't bring them to church, how are we meant to change them? In the same way that our parents might come kicking and screaming, we need to bring our children kicking and screaming. Why? Because their salvation depends on it. Jesus sets us an incredible example of how to look after our parents. If we go to John 19:25. How thoughtful was Jesus about his mum? Obviously, his father Joseph seems to have departed before he started his ministry. But Jesus, even when he is crucified, and this is an amazing verse, John 19:25, says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciples whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, woman, here is your son, and to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, the disciple took him into his home. So Jesus is on the cross. He's been flogged. He's been beaten. His skin's hanging off him. I mean, what would you be thinking that I'd be going, Lord, take me now. Come on, give me a heart attack. I'm done. He goes, Mum, before I go, you need to move in with the Apostle John, and John, you need to move Mum in with you. Before I go, we need to figure out arrangements for my mum's future life. See, he didn't forget about his mum. Oh, he stood up to her. Oh, he ticked her off. But he loved her to the extreme. Now, why was John so eager to take mum, Jesus' mum in? Oh, we've just looked at a passage, haven't we? How Jesus rebuked people for not looking after their parents in their old age. So if John hadn't been a disciple of Jesus, but had been a disciple of the religious group at that time, the Pharisees, John would have gone, not on your life, I'm following the traditions of the Pharisees, not Jesus' teachings. See, the hope for our family is that we are disciples of Jesus, is that we surround ourselves with disciples of Jesus. Are your relationships in the church so good where you can go, you know what? Joe, can you take care of my mum because I'm about to die here, I've got cancer? Would you do that for somebody? That's what the early disciples did. I appreciate Manny. Manny's getting married to Effie and talk about constant moving in with him. He goes, that's absolutely, what's wrong with that? I mean, let's just get on with it. Let's move it in. That's the heart of a disciple. There's no, well, I'm just getting my marriage and, what about, it's like, that's just never even came across his mind. Jesus sets us the example. We need to love our family. Point 5. Why did Jesus treat his parents, his mother, and all of his family in this way? Well, we're now going to go forward to after Jesus has resurrected and gone up to heaven. So Jesus is now gone. He's done his bit. He's given us the example. He's taught everybody what to do. And then in Acts 1, verse 12, it says, then the apostles returned to Jerusalem from the hill called the Mount of Olives, a Sabbath day walk from the city. When they arrived, they went upstairs to the room where they were staying. Those present were Peter, John, James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas son of James. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, with his brothers. So Jesus was always out to convert his family. And what do we see here? His mum and his brothers have gone from thinking he's nuts to now taking on his teaching and being teachers of his teaching. What converted his brothers? Most probably how he treated mum. He went, you know what? I thought he was nuts all this time. They didn't follow him during his time. They went, Jesus, man, you are nuts. You are offending mum. You can imagine your sisters over Christmas or brothers going, you offend mum. Everybody in the family thinks you're nuts. But, in the end, it changes. So much so that the physical brother of Jesus, James, went on to lead the movement of God. Initially, it was Peter. Then it moved to James, as we'll study out in the leaders' meeting, Acts 21:18. James, the brother of Jesus, led the movement and continued to enforce the teachings of Jesus, which are what? Put God first, but love your family. And he would have been a constant reminder as the leader of the movement to people. Put God first, but love your family. Look at me. I became a Christian because Jesus stood up to my opinions of religiosity, stood up to our mum, but look, he inspired me to now lead the worldwide movement. You know, it can take time to convince our family. This has been a pretty amazing year. Some of you know I wrote this book. It's basically a third of it is the scriptures, which is why people like it, I think. And then I just put a few things in between. That's quite a clever way of getting a popular book, by the way. I gave it to my family, and there's great reference there in the beginning to my family. But I've had, should I say, mixed reviews from my family over the years. But I sent this to my parents, and my dad sent me a very small letter at the beginning of the year. And it says, "Thank you for sending us copies of your book, Money is the Answer to Everything. Having read it, I think it will become a must-have book for every treasurer and congregation of all thinking churches." He was church treasurer. "I'm in awe of your knowledge of the Bible and your ability to link each passage or section with Christ's teaching. Obviously, this is a result of a lot of work, study, and inspiration, and it's credit to you, Joseph. On my second reading of the book, I shall understand it more and try to acknowledge the heart of the matter and the many, I love my dad's writing, something or other. Okay, this is an important bit. So, Joseph, I'm proud of you, not only for producing this book, but also for the way you have led your life and the work you do. Well done. You are a true disciple of Christ." 28 years it's taken. 28 years. Some of us expect our family to become Christian this Christmas. Our parents watch our life. They watch our marriages. They watch our parenting. They watch what we give up, not what we give to them. It's not the size of the present that we give them that impresses them, but it's our heart given to God. You know, how did Jesus treat his parents and why? He was very clear. He transferred his allegiance from his parents to God, and yet he obeyed them in everything else. Jesus became a mission-focused man and absolutely upset his family. They thought he was raving nuts. Then he hotens it up and he teaches on priorities, clearly saying, I will divide family. And yet he demonstrated and even attacked the religious people of his day for not looking after his parents. But then why did Jesus do it all? Because he knew the only way to convert his family was to put God first, and that they would be eternally grateful forever and ever. Amen.